Hi everyone, TeaDrinker here, and today I will be reacting to Black Sails Season 4, Episode 1. The reaction will be a quick highlight reel, and the review will be a scene-by-scene analysis. Okay, Season 4, here we go. Ooh, underwater. Alright. What a shot.
Each of whom, present company included, has certainly considered killing me.
I haven't considered killing you in months.
Alright, what's gonna happen? Let's see it. Let's go. Oh, she looks great. She's skeptical.
I don't believe that's what I asked.
I don't believe you want me to answer what you've asked.
Please don't give him any more reason to indulge that feeling.
I love their relationship. I'm so glad she's in Season 4. I mean, it was kind of a safe bet, but, you know.
Gun crews, prepare the starboard batteries, double shot.
My love.
Now, and crew our courses as we approach the harbor.
The man I love.
Well, one of us should probably say something. About what? I don't know. The moment. Find the men in whose name this fight is to be fought.
What a great odd couple. I adore him.
Today there will be vengeance for the death of Charles Vane.
Oh my god. Oh, this is gonna be an incredible season. I'm so excited. I love this show.
It's just as Billy said.
Interesting.
Stand by the anchor. A signal the
What's he seeing? What's he seeing? What's he seeing? Tell me.
What the fuck is the Defiant doing?
What is it? It's kicking off. Oh no. Talk about an inciting incident.
Can we get free?
Okay, I think we'll be okay. We're gonna take a beating, but we'll be fine.
Your orders.
Rogers. There he is. Yeah.
Eastern battery.
They're such a duo now, aren't they?
Ready those guns.
Are they like straight up gonna fight back? Like just brute force fight back? Let's rock and roll. And then it'll tear through. Now that is quite the plot point. What a way to open up the season. And all this production, oh my god, it's so fabulous. Sensational. Come on, Maddie.
What are you doing? Why are we moving in closer?
Is Teach deciding not to help?
We cannot fire the great guns into that mess.
And if they don't chase?
I love their trio rather. Oh. Oh, come on. I am so in this. I'm literally getting full body chills. I'm not exaggerating.
Revenge is a powerful motivator, undoubtedly. Fortunately, my men would like a little of it for themselves as well.
And please have someone retrieve my wife.
Of course, my lord.
Oh yes, Sarah. Yo, there's the pastor. What's up, bro? You made it to the 4th season. We better get at least one more flashback of Miranda, by the way. I am not sick of seeing Louise Barnes, I'm telling you that much for free. All the gals.
Mrs. Rogers, the governor requests your presence.
Oh well, is the wife. What a surprise.
As uncomfortable as it may be, then that is a compromise I am willing to make.
Okay. Interesting justification there.
I heard the same.
What a shot.
I'm told they saw an injured man.
With the tears in her eyes. Fantastic shot. And fantastic actor as well. She's killing it.
Perhaps just that he is my friend too.
Ah. Oh, I'm so soft.
And Mr. Featherstone has fucked us all.
Yes, I know that too.
Featherstone, what the hell?
We sail for Nassau soon.
I knew they'd be together.
Places I could be in this moment to prepare. I choose to be here.
This is the best looking cast of like any show I've seen.
Why?
Since Lost, probably.
He's my friend.
Did you not once tell me of your worry?
Of the
The
darkness.
fate of those whom Captain Flint has called friends before you.
A lot has changed since then.
Clearly.
It has changed since then. A little suspicion is a healthy thing.
Nothing past her.
I would follow you wherever you led.
The costume design. Look at him. Look at what Teach is wearing. The costume design of this show. Wow, another fight scene so soon. Great use of Steadicam there. Oh! Forget the gun, use something else. Yeah. I knew he'd be saved.
Captives number 75.
There are more out there.
Okay, captors.
With our numbers, our ability to...
Are we going to see our boy walking amongst the captives, I wonder?
Captured 9 more just east of the fence line. We think this
Oh,
one's
there's the
Flint's
Groot.
ship's master.
I was there that day. In the forest. When your trap was sprung. Are more important than duty.
Great introduction for an antagonist. You know, cutting a person's ear off is one of those ubiquitously evil acts, isn't it?
Help finishes off for good. Fortunately, we were able to discover the plot in time.
Christ.
Your people.
I'm so curious to find out what exactly happened with Featherstone. It can't just be incompetency, was it? Oh, Flint, I'm so sorry. This must be hard to see. Have they gotten rid of her clavichord? Or is he looking at it? Or is he looking at a clock, I wonder? What's he looking at?
Is it over? I'm asking you. If this war died with him.
Such a great inciting incident for the seasonal arc.
Shall I expect to be reimbursed for the costs of this?
Great rack focus.
You stood in my office.
As your silent partner, I am
There
able
are
to...
no silent partners anymore. I will have no more of them. This is now an island of true friends and mortal enemies, and nothing in between.
He's gonna die. He is going to die this season.
And I will see this through by whatever means I have at my disposal.
For God's sake, Flint.
It seems like my word will govern.
Christ.
I know too.
Oh.
3 men know the resting place of the chest, and 1 woman. He told it to me before we left home.
And she could very well just be lying.
It would be preferable if there will be no pirate king here. Of that much, I am certain.
It was a great way to contrast that with the conversation she had with Sylvie when they were in bed together. So we're going to see how he was captured. Either that or this is going to be like the most depressing drowning sequence I've ever seen in my life. Oh my god, drowning is my biggest fear. You have no idea. You have no idea how afraid I am of drowning. And yet I've never learned to swim. Why have I never learned to swim? Because I'm afraid of drowning. Oh god. Oh. Oh god. Oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh this is giving me flashbacks to 302. Please don't close on Sylvie, please don't close on him. I know it's not gonna close on him, but please don't close on him. No! Oh. Two goats. This is unbearable. Has the water stopped? Oh my god.
Had I been more in that moment.
Charles will still be here.
Be looking down on me in this moment and find me not doing everything in my power.
I love you so much, Jack.
That is something I'm willing to put my life at risk over.
I'm sure shit ain't here to pretend a dead man might think better of me for it. To send a message when we return.
Interesting.
If the governor turns over the one thing he wants.
Oh, those scene transitions. Yeah, Rogers, what were you on about earlier? Like, don't be that way.
To be my partner in this, there are things that you are better off letting me worry about.
That is not what you said.
Oh, shut up, Rogers.
No more silent partners. We all bear the burden of this together.
I do not regret what I did, no matter the consequences. And I didn't want you to have any reason to think that I did.
One of them is dying by the end of the season. Has to be. If Sylvie washes up here, where can he go? The poor lad is going to have to hobble as well. Who's going to discover him? Jesus Christ. Christ. And he doesn't even have, like, he's missing a leg. So either this guy is either secretly on our side or something like that, or Sylvie is going to come up with something mad to survive this encounter. Oh, so he's going to recognize that it's Long John Silver because he's missing a leg.
Long John Silver.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Very interesting. Is this the end of the episode, I wonder? Great cliffhanger. Very, very good cliffhanger. All right. Oh, only 9 episodes left. We're in the single digits now. Wow, what a great introduction to our final season of Black Sails. I just saw there in the credits it said Featherstone, but I didn't see Featherstone in the episode. What happened there? I really want to know what happened there with Featherstone. Like, how did they get that mix up in the first place? And seeing Sylvie separated from the rest of our crew is very, very interesting, of course. And okay, that was my reaction, and here is the review. Okay, so our opening scene for season 4 of Black Sails, we get this wonderful sequence in which the camera is moving up and up and up and up and up as we're underwater, which we now know was Sylvie cutting himself from the rope. When I first watched the scene, I was convinced it wasn't Sylvie because we didn't explicitly see the foot. I was assuming that the show was intentionally giving us a red herring to make us think it was Sylvie, but then it would turn out to not be Sylvie. But of course, now I realized that from the rewatch, they actually did show the foot. They just did it very, very briefly. In any case, given what's going to happen throughout the rest of the episode, it's a great establishment of tension. And that leads us into the conversation that both Flint and Sylvie have. We understand that it's been quite a considerable amount of time since the slaughter of Hornigold and all his men at the Marooners' camp. We understand that Flint and Sylvie seem to be closer than ever before. Flint seems to be very adamant about making sure that the final push to secure Nassau goes correctly, to which Sylvie is equally as adamant that it will go correctly. Flint is reflecting on the fact that so many men involved, present company included, have tried to kill him, and now here he is in a position of needing to make sure that the alliance itself is, again, maintained, but also used as the correct means to an end in order to achieve the successful capture of Nassau. So right off the bat, seeing that there is going to be, of course, a firefight of some sort, then leading directly into Flint and Sylvie speaking with one another, we already get the impression that this is going to be an episode with a huge amount of payoff. The following scene, in which we see Sylvie and Maddie speak to one another, I mean, it was pretty much guaranteed that Maddie was going to make it back into the season, but it didn't stop me from being so happy just to see her pop up onto the screen anyway. Regardless, we get the conversation between the two of them. It is apparent that Maddie isn't really the most trusting of Flint, despite the amount of time that they have now spent with one another. Maddie seems to still trust Sylvie and Sylvie only. And with Sylvie making it clear to Maddie that Flint is apprehensive about the assault they're about to launch on Nassau, given the fact that so many men have been against Flint in the past, and that this alliance, as it stands, isn't really the strongest of alliances necessarily, that there is still a lot of room for improvement. Nonetheless, with the assault going on, Maddie seems to basically share the same sentiment, which Sylvie is asking her not to indulge such a sentiment, lest it makes matters worse. So already we can see that this is presumably the introduction of quite a significant plot point, be it for the episode or for several episodes, or indeed the season itself. We know that we now have an introduction for a plot point that will see the alliance between Flint and Maddie specifically to be tested. Whether or not that means it is going to be forced to be stronger than ever, or both characters are going to end up being separate, or maybe even enemies by the season's end, or even in a couple of episodes end. Who knows? I doubt it would be by the end of the episode when they would bring it in kind of like that soon into the episode. If they're bringing it in that explicitly, I mean, and I'm assuming I haven't even watched the episode, I've literally just watched the episode, but were I a first-time audience member, I wouldn't think that they would have it that quickly. Like, by the end of this episode, have Maddie and Flint at each other's throats. But be that as it may, it is fantastic to see Maddie back. Next, we see probably my favourite character of Black Sails. As I've said so many times, well, look, at this stage, I think it is pretty much neck and neck with Flint and Jack. Flint maybe having a centimetre more, but be that as it may. We see Jack is truly in his element. We see that he has really risen to the ranks of captain. Teach is still, no nonsense with him, but of course there's the great sense of respect that Teach has there. It goes without saying. Having like the little bit of comedic relief of Jack wanting to make a speech to rise up the men, to like really rile them up, to which Teach says to no wonder you don't say much, was great. But of course we then get the introduction for this episode and what is presumably going to be the season as well. Even without seeing the future scenes, we know from this scene in and of itself that the introduction of the plot point for Jack here is he seeks vengeance for the death of Charles Vane, for his friend, and really for his role model in a lot of ways. I spoke many a time before of how Charles Vane seems to represent for Jack the ideal of legacy in a lot of ways. So for him to seek vengeance for that makes complete sense. So yeah, and insofar as the season introductory scenes, couldn't ask for more for Jack. So the next two scenes are connected, but I'm still going to split them up just for ease of talking. I gotta say, regardless of how much is CGI and how much is practical effects, they have really upped their game with the production, especially for this episode. Lord knows what's going to happen in the final 9, but with this one, I mean, it's clear to see when our guys are approaching the barricade, like that whole sequence of like seeing the ship like just as it's reaching the barricade and the way it's slowly tipping and how long the shots are and the size of the shots as well. We get such a great sense of scale of the ship in comparison to the men aboard it, and of course with the upcoming scenes as well, we really get that sense. But insofar as introducing the inciting incident for this episode for our characters, like very, very tense stuff, and they just pull it off beautifully. And how the shot of the ship from the fort's point of view then introduces Rogers, giving him his season introduction, was just so well done. And so the next scene itself, again, I'm just going to split it up kind of beat by beat just to make sure I cover everything, because it is quite a long action sequence, all things considered. I thought it was great the way in which, following Rogers beginning to attack our men with the chain cannon, seeing that affect the canvases up top, seeing Flint making a desperate attempt to raise it to gallants, and then of course it being attacked by Rogers. Throughout that sequence, they did something really great with the directing, which is they did a close-up on Flint, on his face looking towards the fortress, and then cutting to Rogers in a similarly framed close-up looking towards the sea, and then back to Flint, that reverse shot. Because they did that in a close-up to an extreme close-up with both men, where it's Flint and then Rogers and then back to Flint, it's as though the men are really staring into each other's eyes. They made it look as if the men are actually this far apart, rather than one being in a fortress and the other being all the way out at sea. Just that little detail I really loved, and I couldn't help but think to myself, when you see Flint shouting fire to the men, or shouting any sort of orders to the crew, for the actors, I wonder how often it was that they would just totally lose their voice doing that. But be that as it may, just a great continuation of a great action sequence. And so we get the big scene of the episode. Well, one of the big scenes of the episode anyway. We get the continuation of the inciting incident for Flint in this episode, in which we see Sylvie go all the way underwater. So we can assume from the very opening shot of the episode that it is indeed Sylvie who has gone underwater. Prior to him falling in, we get a brief scene with Jack and Anne talking about how they could serve as a suitable distraction for Rogers, that if they were able to present themselves close enough to the fort, that he would then present his forces onto the likes of Teach and Jack and Anne, so then they can make their escape, and then that'll give our guys enough breathing room to escape. And to which Anne says, and what's going to happen if he doesn't pursue us? It goes to show how dire the situation is, not the least of which, of course, underlined by, in the very following scene, we do see Sylvie fall into the water, and we see what's left of our ship just slowly sinking. Maddie and Flint in equal parts distraught as to what's going on. Of course, Maddie shows it a lot more than Flint. We know how Flint is. Nonetheless, it's doing a great job of, if the previous scene did a good job of creating tension, this is now doing a great job of delivering on that tension. It like to see, for the season to open up with us already like there, ready to fight Rogers, rather than building and waiting until the end of the episode or something like that. They do it first thing, they get it right out of the way, and to see it fail in this kind of fashion is just, it really does say a lot as to how well paced the show is. They really wrote this show, in my opinion, to be in such a way where they are giving you everything that needs to be there and very little else. Even when they do have scenes, of course, of world building, as every show does and probably should. Nonetheless, when you get a scene, when you get a season opener that just cuts right to the chase with no BS about it, they just want to get this story underway, I find it truly impressive. We get a brief scene in which Roger's right-hand man, if you want to call him that, I'm not sure. I don't know his name, and I don't know the exact title that a person his position is called, so for now I'll just refer to him as right-hand man, and you'll know who I'm referring to. We see them talking about how they are indeed going to pursue Vane, and how that will ultimately pursue Vane. Goes to show where my mind is, doesn't it? R.I.P. Going to pursue Teach, as well as Jack and Anne, in order to give us guys breathing room to make our escape. We do see that Rogers is proving himself to be a formidable strategist in this sense. We do see that he is able to maintain a level head, and he is wondering about the cost of rounding up the lifeboats. He's wondering, to what degree is passion actually going to be that much of a positive element to this scenario. So just little moments of characterization like that is something I really appreciate. And of course, we are going to see more of Right-Hand Man as the episode goes on. But to introduce him here rather than later, where it would have come off like a bit like, whoa, where the hell did you come from? I thought it was a very nice touch. So following this, we get a short scene with Elle, Max, and the chambermaid, whose name I still have not learned, and I deeply apologize. I'm shooting so many of these reactions and reviews back to back. I'm not making the time to look up names or stuff like that, but we both know who I'm talking about. Anyway, We see the scene of them in the shelter awaiting news as to who it is that's actually winning this battle. And, you know, upon the rewatch just there, I couldn't help but laugh just at how directly they were presenting us with the storyline of Elle is now part of this role as Mr. Rogers' wife. I mean, of course they make it very explicit. Well, they make it more than explicit. It is pure exposition. It is very much the story and the plot line in the succeeding scenes of Elle and Rogers together. But I couldn't help but laugh on the rewatch because they have her literally doing embroidery. Like, they're just being that explicit. They're being that on the nose of it, of Elle maintaining the appearances of being Mr. Rogers' wife. And of course, her and Max then have the back and forth about it. Max asking her about the efficacy of the presentation she's putting on. I don't think it's bad. Like, this isn't a negative thing. This isn't a criticism at all. I just, upon a rewatch, it was just very much like, how are we going to show that Elle is in the role of being Mr. Rogers' woman? Oh yeah, we'll have her do embroidery. I don't know, I got some sarcastic humor out of it. And so in the succeeding scene, we get our true season intro to Eleanor, in which we see that she is no longer playing the role of Eleanor Guthrie. She is truly playing the role of Mr. Rogers' wife. I think the show did a great job of making it very clear exactly what it is that Elle is thinking this moment. Like, I doubt that the show would, you know, all of a sudden just, you know, fall into screeching levels of sexism and dehumanizing roles for women. It's not Death Note. We're not getting that. But it was great to see that level of exposition nonetheless, where Eleanor makes it very, very clear that if Roger's goal is better aided by her sitting amongst men's wives as opposed to sitting amongst the men, then that is what she's comfortable doing. So we get the sense of her autonomy there. Of course, with this being the only episode of the season I've watched so far, and of course there are the succeeding scenes between Elle and Rogers, but nonetheless, I am curious to see if this is going to be a seasonal plot point for Elle, as to how much of this is going to come down to her wanting to fit the role. Now, I'm assuming, and I don't mean to jump ahead too much with the rest of the episode, but I am assuming there is going to be some betrayal of Rogers that will have to happen. Whether it's deserved to thwart Rogers' plans or not is a different story, but I'm assuming there's going to be some undermining of Rogers' ideas for Elle's own benefit, given the fact that, of course, she's been in conflict with just about every single man she's gotten close to at this point. I don't necessarily think it'll be, let's say, her reverting to the old ways of the way she was with Vane. I suppose the fact that months have passed and she's been with Rogers for so long, even to this degree, is saying quite a lot. There would have to be something very significant to happen to Elle in order for her to betray Rogers in such a direct way. I don't think it would be something small. I don't think it would be something ultimately insignificant that would lead to Elle betraying him in that kind of way. There does have to be something very real and very tangible, and preferably something that would really give us an insight as to who she is and the philosophy behind Eleanor Guthrie. Again, without getting too far ahead of things, she does reference the value of her family name later on in the episode, but be that as it may, I thought it was a great season intro for Elle, and I'm very much looking forward to see what happens next. So, the following scene where we are washed up on the beach is pretty much bringing us into Act 2 for Flint's storyline. What has happened is that there is no sign of Sylvie to be found. We get this great interaction between himself and Maddie, in which they both talk about being friends to Flint, and of course it means different things to both of them. That goes without saying. But it's creating a great sense of tension. It's creating great sense of drama and conflict for the characters, in the sense that Sylvie is someone who in the opening scenes is explicated as being so important for the cause as well as important for both of them. And now for both of these people to be completely separated from the one person who for both of them was their confidant is great conflict for the characters, just to get at that idea again. It's then shortly succeeded by Billy arriving to Flint, who informs us that they were well aware of the barricade that would be in the harbour, and that Billy tried his best to communicate that to Flint, but of course Featherstone messed up the communication. We don't find out exactly what happened there or where Featherstone is, even though he was listed in the credits. Maybe I missed that. Maybe I'll see it when I'm doing the rest of the rewatch here. But be that as it may, we understand that with Billy being under the impression that Sylvie is lost at sea, presumed dead, the best they can do is move on. Best they can do is gather the resources they do have now that they've lost all their ships, and do their best to regroup to fight for another day. And of course the scene then ends with Maddie staring off into the water, her truly feeling herself lost at sea now that her confidant is gone. So this is a great introduction into the second act of the story, where what has happened now is alongside us losing our ships and losing that particular fight, we have lost Sylvie, possibly forever. And what is going to happen now for both Maddie and Flint for their plotline this episode is going through the process of adapting to the new world and adapting, them crossing the threshold and trying to adapt to this underworld, this new experience, a new environment to the best way they can. So we got a great flashback scene between Maddie and Sylvie, confirming that yes, they did end up being a romantic couple, or at the very least a sexual couple. We got exposition of Sylvie learning that Billy has been creating the Long John Silver persona for Sylvie, which has left him somewhat unpleased with the moniker. And alongside that, we have Sylvie, questioning what is going to be the consequences of that. That for him and Flint to be a partnership, for them to be a duo, they need to be regarded as being on an equal footing. That for one to be elevated above the other, even via the means of fictitious storytelling, is just not going to suit the dynamic. And what's interesting there is, and of course, how this works as foreshadowing for what we have seen happening in the scene beforehand, given that this is a flashback, of how that was foreshadowing for now the two of them being separated and having to go their separate ways. It's great foreshadowing when Maddie is questioning to what degree, first of all, to what degree Sylvie truly thinks Flint actually is his friend, but more importantly, to what degree does Sylvie really think he needs Flint, that Sylvie is this fully formed man regardless of his connection with Flint, that he can truly stand on his own 2 feet, even if one of them isn't a real foot. But nonetheless, Sylvie does have the competency. He has what it takes to be king, as Maddie very much says. So to have that idea planted in his head, to have there be a creation of conflict, possibly, within Sylvie's head as to what degree he truly views himself as being a friend to Flint, or at the very least necessitating Flint, and having that contrasted with what Flint was talking about in the scene just beforehand, where he says he does regard Sylvie as a friend, and how Maddie ultimately either sees through it, or she's just disenfranchised with the idea to begin with, is very, very interesting. For that conversation with Sylvie to be the thing that's on her mind as she stares out into the sea. Well, of course, we do see what happens with the rest of the episode, with how Maddie interacts with Flint, but be that as it may, I thought it was a great way of explicating Sylvie's view of himself as the supposed Long John Silver character. It explicates how he views himself in relation to Flint and vice versa. But of course, most importantly, it's given us a great insight into Maddie and how she views the dynamic, how she ultimately views both of these men. So our next scene, we are catching up with Teach, Jack and Anne, seeing what they're up to. We see that their ship, the Revenge, is about to be boarded. It is, the Redcoats come, and they pretty much they pretty much win that battle effortlessly. Although what's interesting is that we see Jack, who is throwing himself into the fray of the fight and very nearly gets himself killed numerous times, and very, very nearly gets himself killed at one particular point, only for Anne coming to rescue him. So we see this as the continuation of Jack's plot point that he is committed to the idea of avenging Charles Vane. Although that explicit level of exposition comes later in the episode, within this scene we can pretty much put two and two together, that whatever it is that he is doing with strong conviction. He is doing it in such a way that he is fully willing to put himself into harm's way. And I thought it was great to have that conversation between Anne and Teach about him, because it shows that, you know, similar to Anne, Teach does have Jack figured out, and he is able to figure out exactly what's going on in Jack's head. So to have both of them act as not necessarily a foil, but definitely as a supporting character to Jack and what his plot line is going to be this season, I thought was very, very strong. And I got to mention as well, because I did mention it in the reaction, but I've just got to say it here as well, the costume design for this show has always been excellent. But have you seen what Teach was wearing? Like the jacket with all the detail here, absolutely stunning. Just absolutely really, really great stuff. And the action scene itself was great, like all the action sequences are, but there was this one particular shot which I really liked, where there was this steady cam actually attached to the actor of Jack in that sequence, which I thought worked really, really great. So overall, I thought it was a great continuation of Jack and where he is with regards to his episode's arc. So we have our scene with Rogers, his right-hand man, and the recent captors back in Nassau. To split this into two, for the first half of the scene, we have it made clear that there's very little help out there outside of their own forces for Rogers in order to secure Nassau in the way that it deserves to be secured. He makes it very clear that, you know, Spain and England can be at war with one another. That's just a useless Game of Thrones in order for them to ultimately kind of keep themselves busy. That's kind of the tone I got from him when he was talking about that. But then he speaks about how the actual existence of Nassau itself is under threat and no one seems to be willing to lend a hand. And I think it was a great detail of him talking about wanting more informants and wanting more kaftas, particularly with what it is we're going to learn about Rogers and his motivations towards the end of the episode. But having that detail just in the scene in and of itself, of showing his attention to detail and his willingness to face the hard truths of the matter, and ultimately his frustration with not having any outside help and knowing that they are limited in the resources we have. It was a great way of not necessarily characterizing Rogers. I don't think it you could see it as reinforcement, but I don't even think that that's what made... I don't necessarily think that the writing was made stronger or that the scene necessarily showed how strong the writing was necessarily. I think it was just more so trying to get across the fact of Rogers is, at least in this regard, very competent at what he does, and he does have, again, that attention to detail. So for the first half of the scene, I thought it was great to include that type of characterization. And so the second half of the scene, in which we see the awful case of brutality enacted amongst the Groot, we see that the right-hand man, of course, introduction of him being quite the formidable adversary for this season, but there's a great line he says towards the end, which I'm only after catching here on the rewatch, in which he knows how these men are not going to turn on one another because it's not the type of war anymore. In other words, that the pirate rebellion that Rogers and his men are going to be fighting are ones that are going to be stronger than ever before, because they have a loyalty unto themselves that Rogers and his crew will find it very, very difficult to shake. So again, just the little details like that and how they eventually accumulate over time and kind of snowball and snowball. Not only does it make for great storytelling, but in particular, such as this moment now, it really makes it worth rewatching the show. We get this really interesting scene in which we return to the base camp for Billy. Two great interactions, one between Flint and Billy, and then the other between Maddie and Flint once they reach Miranda's old house. The first interaction that we really see how far along Billy has come, for him to basically be the leader of the rebellion outside of whatever it is he's manufacturing with the creation of Long John Silver. Outside of that, he is the arms and legs of this resistance. And again, we do see Billy being quite ruthless in enacting his forces, in that when he references how two of their men were very close to enacting a plan that would end up betraying all of them, that they took measures to make sure that wouldn't come into fruition. And as he's describing that, we walk past the two men who appear to be crucified, or something appearing to be crucified, to send a message to all the others that this is what happens when we discover that you're a traitor to us. Once we get into town, Flint kind of notes on Billy describing everyone around him as being his people. And I don't mean to jump ahead too much, but I do think it's worth pointing out that, given the fact that as the episode goes on, we're going to have the conversation about kings and who it is that should be a king, or should we even have a king at all. That is, of course, an important detail that they have that in early. But I think what's even more interesting is when, and again, this is why you get so much out of rewatching shows, is in the preceding scene, we had Rogers and his right-hand man. We had him talking about how England and Spain are at war over who it is that sits on the throne. Well, here we have, the law and order versus the pirates. Here we have the macro level versus the micro level of how it does result in a Game of Thrones to a particular degree. Following this, we get a really uncomfortable scene between Rogers, Max, and Elle. And leading up to that scene, I only noticed on the rewatch how, as they're walking towards the building in which these trials are commencing, or at least the pre-trials are commencing, we see Max making eye contact with the right-hand man, who we know to be quite brutal, and they lock eyes for a moment as she notices the cruelty being enacted amongst the captors. Just a nice little moment to show Max's awareness of the situation, and of course seeing that right-hand man again, seeing what his deal is, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of him. I can't see him surviving the end of the season, be that as it may. When we actually get inside, we have this really uncomfortable scene in which Max, as subservient as we have seen her since season 1, basically in the early episodes, her very much trying to ask as amicably as she can if she can be reimbursed for the cost of providing for Rogers' men, making the point that she should be seen as being independent from Rogers. And Rogers is very adamant of, if you are in any way a friend of mine and you want to provide for this war, you will do it out of your own pocket. And even going as far as to basically say directly, do I have any reason to question your loyalty? Are you going to be a friend of me, or are you going to be a friend of the pirates? Like, basically being that direct, and Elle being quite taken aback. We are going to see where the storyline is going there, but, for my first reaction that, I was really taken aback by that. I'm wondering what the hell is going on in Rogers' head, even to the point of believing that Rogers is probably going to die as a result of this season, because for me, I was taken aback, and I wasn't the biggest fan upon my first time watching, because I was thinking, are they creating him to be an antagonist because power has gone to his head or something like that? That seems to be kind of an inconsistency with writing, so I am glad that we got the succeeding scenes. So yeah, even though this is like literally one of the top 10 TV show I've seen all time, potentially a top 5 TV show, depending on where the rest of this season goes. Despite all that, I still have my moments of doubting whether or not the writers are good at their job. So yeah, that goes to show what type of person I am. And then, of course, we get an absolute highlight of the episode, that fantastic scene. The fantastic scene between Billy, Flint, and Maddie. All 3 characters just killing it here. So we see the great exposition from Billy in that he has really risen to ranks, but more importantly, he is seen as being the anchor towards these men. As he explicates to Flint, he is the one that has bled with them, he's the one that is working alongside them, he is the one that has brought them together in the first place. And though Flint's contributions are appreciated, they are not essential. If there is anyone who's going to answer these men, it is going to be Billy. To which Flint, if Flint being Flint, is so determined to be the one to lead this charge for the victory. He is the Eren Yeager here. No one is more committed to the great cause than Flint, going as far as to give Billy an ultimatum of basically you either let me lead the way here, or I don't tell you where the chest is. And then we have Maddie then, who chimes in. And it was great the way they kept doing those extreme close-ups of Billy and Flint back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then when Maddie's voice cuts through, it's really effective in that way. We have Maddie talking about how she knows the location of the chest as well, and whether or not she is actually telling the truth, or she's using that as leverage, it doesn't really matter. The point is that she is making it very clear. She literally says it, is that there will be no pirate king here. Now, basing it on my interpretation, I'm assuming she just means in general there won't be one king in charge, because she says one person governing would be preferable, but it is not as simple as that. So I don't think she's necessarily trying to imply that we should have a queen instead of a king, because I don't think, for one, I don't think the show would try to shoehorn in some stupid, like, anti-men rhetoric like that necessarily. I don't think this is the type of show where they would just lazily shoehorn in girl power for the sake of it. But even leaving that aside, what we know about Maddie, we know that the respect she has for, be it a queen or a king, what we need is a person who's able to govern, point blank. It just needs to be that. But what she's saying here is that it can't fall down to one person, which is so good. And this is where this scene is so good, because what she's saying there is it ties into the previous conversations we were having with Allegiance, like literally in the first scene of the show. Flint was the first scene in the episode, rather. Flint was talking about Allegiance, and he was talking about whether men trust him, blah, 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 blah. But then, of course, we also got the conversation Rogers was having with his right-hand man about England and Spain constantly fighting over the king. So, fighting over the throne for the role of king. So to now see this interaction between Flint and Billy, then undercut by Maddie saying, this is not going to work by having one person in charge. What a setup for the rest of the season. I am so excited. From the point of view of character analysis and indeed just episode structure analysis, I don't think there's really a huge amount to talk about with the underwater sequence from Sylvie, only to say that it is so well directed. The art direction, the cinematography of that is just absolutely insane. Like, oh my god, those wide shots when we see the entirety of the ship and the kind of like the blooming of blood in the water, like in the way everything is just slowly falling down, and having that being the backdrop of Sylvie just desperately trying to navigate the ship, and that scene just played me like a fiddle to bit, where he's trying to squeeze his way through the wooden frame. Like, it's such a trope. It's so common in underwater desperately looking for breath scenes, and it wraps me around its finger every single time. I feel so viscerally. I'm just so afraid of drowning, and afraid of I'm afraid of changing this jumper between reviews. Like, there's no way I would survive in this world. Absolutely no way. But from the directing point of view, just absolutely fantastic stuff. Okay, so our next scene with Jack and Anne. So first of all, I'll try to include a thumbnail of it if I can, in that there's this great shot in which, after the man tending to Jack's wounds leaves the room, the metal bars that are there holding the table together, Anne is framed inside that, so it's a frame within a frame. Man, like, the cinematographers here, they were just having a blast. They really, like, there was so much creative freedom given to these cinematographers. I spoke before in the reaction to 308 how they had the beams of light coming down on Maddie's face when she's holding a knife that's in Sylvie's hand. Just how it was something that didn't need to be there, but the fact that they went out of their way to achieve it was so good. The stuff with Anne here, like, it's, again, not necessarily as intentional, in the sense that you're not necessarily getting a huge amount storytelling wise from that kind of frame within a frame, but it's something that does just kind of highlight the actor in a way. it's something that doesn't have to be there, but the fact that it is shows, again, to use that phrase, the attention to detail. They're pulling off all the stops here for Black Sails production, and I love it. Anyway, as to the scene itself, we basically get confirmation that this is what Jack's character arc is going to be, or at the very least be partly influenced by. This episode and this scene very well could be the thing that knocks Jack back down to earth and stops him living out his vengeance fantasy for Charles Vane. Not to say that's going to dissipate entirely, but for it to exist without him being called out upon it, that seems to be an thwarting that. Maybe, I mean, I've only seen the one episode, maybe they'll continue it on for the rest of the season, but we do nonetheless see how important that is to Jack. We see how much he has been affected by the person whom he, of course, connected to on a personal level, but outside of that, also had the connection of, this is a person in whom I am very much guaranteed to have my legacy and have my meaning. And Anne has always been a great foil for Jack's character in, once more, bringing him back down to earth and giving him the hard dose of reality. And that's made none the clearer than in the end of the scene, in which Anne says to him, like, if you're waiting for things to split and for the motives and the end to be at odds with one another, it's already happened. Jack says, oh God, what has Teach done? And we find out that what Teach is doing is he's going back to Nassau, and he's making it very, very clear that if he wants this to end, he has to hand over Eleanor Guthrie. What a setup. Oh, this show does set up so well, I swear to God. This is going to be such an exciting season, just for that in and of itself. Teach, like, relentlessly wanting Eleanor Guthrie because she killed Charles Vane. And of course it's more than that. Of course Teach isn't that shallow of a character that he's just so upset about Charles Vane being killed that he's going to murder this Eleanor Guthrie bitch. It's not going to be that simple. Of course there is more nuance to him. But nonetheless, as a plot point and as a setup, I thought it was great to see. Like, it's entertaining. It works on that surface level entertaining level, but it is also just great further characterization for Teach, and indeed how it is going to end up working towards the overarching plot point for himself and Jack and Anne, and, well, the taking of Nassau itself. So, in our penultimate scene of the episode, in which we see what the fuck Rogers is going on about. Like, why is he treating Max the way he is? Why is he talking about no silent partners? Why is he not letting Elle in? And we get the exposition that his ex-wife is basically taking as much money as she can out of him as punishment for what has gone on. And for that scene to then end with Elle saying, well, her family has money and influence, so is mine, I find that to be really interesting because, of course, even without that, we learn that this is a means to an end of reinforcing the relationship that Rogers and Elle have. That's very much the purpose of the scene, for him to say to her, I didn't tell you about it because I didn't want you to feel as though this relationship is something I in any way whatsoever regret. That scene makes their bond stronger. It explicates how far it's come, as have the previous scenes, but again, it does do a good job of really solidifying it into the heads of the audience that this is how strong the relationship is, or at least is for now. So for that then to end with Elle talking about, is basically saying in as many words, I will do the best I can to rectify the matter. I have no idea where that's going to go. Presumably she is going to try to get in with the creditors, which will then end up alleviating the financial stress of Rogers, which in turn will aid the Nassau situation. Who knows? Maybe Elle knows where the chest with all the money is, and she's just going to give that to the creditors, or give it to Sarah, seeing as she wants money that much. But no, in any case, I'm not really sure what is going to happen there. But what is certain, of course, from that scene is that the bond of Elle and Rogers is at the moment shown to be very, very strong. And I hinted earlier in the review as to the degree to which Elle is potentially going to undermine all of that, and she is going to be the thwart to Rogers by the end of the season. But nonetheless, as it stands, I'm very, very much intrigued to see exactly what's going to happen with that storyline between Elle and Rogers. And so our final scene, in which Sylvie has washed up on the shore, missing a leg. Well, he was always missing a leg, but missing the support for his leg, just completely not in a great situation whatsoever. And of course, things go from bad to worse, where he looks over and he sees a mysterious man killing those who are still alive on the beach. We can only hope that this man is killing redcoats that he sees, but of course at this point in time we can presume that he's killing anyone he sees in general. Why? We don't know. Again, I like to think that this man is going around killing the redcoats and he's not actually killing some of our guys. That would be ultra barbaric, but be that as it may, he catches up to Sylvie and says, "Long John Silver, welcome home." I'm assuming he's washed up on NASA again. Oh man, like, these are the moments that humble me. These are the moments that, to whatever degree I think I'm like knowledgeable and, you know, just really understanding story, I come across something like this and I'm like, nope, I'm stumped. I have no idea what this is about. It's probably good in that way. I think I'm knowledgeable enough to appreciate the finer details, and then I'm just completely ignorant to the bigger picture, and then some things are just always going to be a mystery to me, and they're always going to keep me in suspense. But, you know, joking aside, I do think that it is, as I said earlier, it's such strong storytelling that Sylvie is so utterly separated from the rest of our guys that they have to survive without him and he has to survive without all of them. That whatever it is that... I'm trying to think, what is his seasonal arc going to be? We had a huge amount of setup in the last episode of season 3 of him very much being a equal to Flint, if not maybe a foil to him entirely. So to see him this far separated and being said, welcome home. I really want to watch the next episode, but unfortunately I'm going to have to wait. Probably, I'd say at least 4 or 5 days just to get through the backlog of editing I have. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm trying to think of what's going to happen there. You know what? I'm not going to think about it that much. I'm content with not knowing everything about screenwriting. I'm totally content with also just getting things dead wrong. If you've been watching these for a while, you'll remember my whole "those kids aren't actually alive, but they live in Flint's imagination" theory that I had. So hey, if being stupid from time to time, or maybe even a lot of the time, if that's the price of admission to enjoying television, I'll happily pay it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my reaction to the first episode of the last season of Black Sails. I'm in the single digits now. Oh, I'm in the single digits. There's only 9 left. This many. I don't even need 2 fully formed hands to count the amount of episodes I have left of this fantastic season and this fantastic series. Ugh. Well, I suppose that's pretty much the note I could end this on. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it all the way to the end of this episode, as you'll know, I like to end these videos with a fact. So here is your fact. Did you know that the main inventor of the fire hydrant is forever going to be a mystery? Because the inventor of what is now the standardized fire hydrant used worldwide, the patent for that fire hydrant was destroyed in December 15th, 1836. And how was the patent for the fire hydrant destroyed? In a fire. And that's your fact of the day. There's lots of fire in this episode as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.